Doria Ragland arrived at Clarence house expecting diplomacy and dignity, but within minutes, the situation spiraled. Royal guards stiffened, security whispered into earpieces. Then, refusal. In front of stunned witnesses, the mother of Meghan Markle was denied entry. And the real shock? This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It was meant to be a quiet, coordinated appearance, a gesture of goodwill, a chance to normalize relations between the Sussexes and the senior royals. Meghan's mother, Doria, had been formally invited to London as part of what aides described as a soft reset. She arrived with grace, without fanfare, dressed for diplomacy. But the second her vehicle reached the gates of Clarence house, everything changed. Security hesitated. A call was made. And then came the words no one expected to hear directed at her. She's not on the list. Officials, seemingly caught off guard by their own command, scrambled to cover the moment. But the message was crystal clear. Doria was not welcome. This wasn't a breach of planning. It was a breach of trust. To understand the weight of that moment, you have to understand where she was standing. Clarence House isn't just a royal residence. It's the seat of King Charles' personal power. It's where decisions are made behind tightly sealed doors. For Doria to be turned away from there, on an official visit, signaled something darker than mere disorganization. Meghan, reportedly waiting inside with a select group of aides, received the news seconds after it happened. Her first words, overheard by a source close to the family, "It's happening again." Not just exclusion, not just protocol, but a targeted humiliation. One that dredged up the trauma of years past of being sidelined, erased, made to feel like an intruder in a family that always claimed to welcome outsiders. Eyewitnesses described the scene as tense, deliberate, and above all coordinated. It wasn't chaos. It was controlled. They knew exactly what they were doing. One former royal staffer confided. The refusal didn't come from a clipboard. It came from somewhere much higher. Every step, every word, every pause was executed with surgical precision. Not a single apology was issued at the scene. Not a single door opened. Doria, dignified as ever, left without protest. But the implications of that moment didn't leave with her. But what made this snub even more shocking was who gave the silent order and why it was never meant to be known. Royal insiders claim the command didn't come from aides or staff, but from the top. King Charles, behind closed doors, had issued a quiet directive. No private access for Doria during formal royal proceedings. Why? The reasons trace back further than anyone expected. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment security call or a clerical error in protocol. According to sources close to Clarence House, the king had long harboured an unspoken discomfort with Doria Ragland's involvement in official royal settings. It wasn't personal, they said. It was political. Ever since the Windsor wedding, where Doria sat alone while the rest of Meghan's family was either absent or disgraced, Charles had viewed her presence as complicated, difficult to explain within the strict hierarchy of royal tradition. She was neither titled nor married into royalty, and for the image-conscious monarchy, that mattered far more than anyone was willing to admit. Privately, there had been murmurs about optics, how Doria's presence blurred the lines of who belonged inside the institution and who didn't. Clarence House officials had begun internally labelling her as extended family, a subtle but strategic categorization that placed her outside the circle of those who could be present during state or ceremonial moments. It gave them just enough of a loophole to deny her access while avoiding direct confrontation. But coded language and quiet directives couldn't hide the truth. This was exclusion dressed up in tradition, a veil over the same pattern Meghan and Harry had fought so hard to expose. Meghan, sources say, had been warned. Whispers of potential frostiness had reached her days before the visit. She reportedly expressed concern to her team, suspecting that something might go wrong. But even she didn't expect the outright denial her mother faced. This wasn't just cold, it was calculated. a move designed to send a message without ever having to say the words out loud. King Charles, determined to preserve what he viewed as traditional appearances, had chosen image over inclusion. And in doing so, he reignited a wound the monarchy had only just begun to bandage. What makes this revelation even more damning is its familiarity. Because the refusal at Clarence House didn't come in isolation. It was part of a wider pattern, a quiet strategy to manage Doria's presence, or rather, her absence, from events that could draw uncomfortable questions about the royal family's boundaries. It wasn't about protocol, it was about control. And this time, the cost was dignity. And yet, what seemed like a cold institutional move carried a deeper sting because this wasn't the first time Doria had been subtly erased. From the wedding to the birth of Archie, Doria Ragland has walked a fine line between presence and absence. Royal watchers now believe a pattern was hiding in plain sight, a slow, calculated distancing of Meghan's mother from royal milestones. While the world celebrated Meghan's fairy tale moment at St. George's Chapel, many overlooked a chilling detail. Doria sat alone, the only family member invited from Meghan's side. She was there, but only barely. There was no warm welcome from the Windsors. No visible interaction with senior royals, just a solitary figure, respectfully positioned but clearly on the fringes. And that was just the beginning. As time went on, Doria's quiet exclusion grew more evident and more painful. She was absent from the hospital wing when Archie was born, missing from the christening photos released to the press, and notably absent from the famed royal balcony appearances that mark moments of national pride. Her name was rarely mentioned, her presence barely acknowledged, and when she did appear, it felt more symbolic than sincere. An insider close to the Sussexes once said, "She was always there but never really in it." That line has become emblematic of Doria's entire experience with the monarchy. It wasn't just that she wasn't invited to everything, it was that her inclusion, when it happened at all, felt more like compliance than embrace. Every effort to formally integrate her into royal life through charity work, joint appearances, or public acknowledgements was met with resistance. Meghan reportedly pushed behind the scenes to give her mother a larger role. She believed Doria's quiet strength and compassion could be an asset to the crown, a bridge between tradition and modernity. But those efforts were quietly stifled. Royal aides would postpone meetings, suggestions would vanish into silence. The message was always the same. There was no place for Doria beyond the shadows. Yet, through it all, Doria remained silent, dignified, unshaken. She never lashed out in interviews, never gave the press a soundbite, never weaponized her exclusion. But her absence said more than any statement could. She was visible only when it served the institution, and invisible the moment she posed a challenge to its comfort. For Meghan, this wasn't just personal, it was heartbreaking. Watching her mother sidelined over and over again became a silent war she fought alone. Each shuttered door, each cold shoulder, each forced smile behind palace walls chipped away at the dream of unity she had once believed in. And now, after being publicly denied entry at Clarence House, the narrative is no longer subtle. It's undeniable. The institution that embraced her husband has quietly rejected her mother. But this latest humiliation didn't go unnoticed and sparked an unexpected response from the one royal who rarely intervenes. She's the woman who has survived scandal and outlasted criticism, but even Camila couldn't stay silent. When news of Doria's rejection made its way into royal circles, the Queen Consort made a rare and pointed remark, and it stunned everyone in the room. In what was meant to be a routine strategy meeting inside one of the palace's private salons, Camila reportedly addressed the Doria incident not with sympathy, but with a chilling calm. Surrounded by senior aides and trusted confidants, she uttered 7 words that would ignite whispers across every corridor of Buckingham Palace. "There are rules for a reason, you know." At first, it sounded like protocol, but those who heard it knew better. This wasn't about rules, it was about power. And Camila had just reminded everyone exactly who held it. To the outside world, Camila has been positioned as a woman of reconciliation, a survivor who endured decades of scorn and emerged as the queen consort. But those who truly understand royal politics know her silence is rarely passive. It's strategic. And when she chooses to speak, even subtly, it's never accidental. Her comment was interpreted by many as a veiled justification for the rejection of Doria, a quiet endorsement of exclusion, cloaked in the language of tradition. Behind closed doors, Camila is said to believe deeply in preserving structure within the royal family. To her, the monarchy thrives on order, hierarchy, and bloodlines. Disrupt that balance, and the whole institution begins to unravel. That belief has long put her at odds with Meghan, whose very presence challenged centuries of royal expectation. Sources close to the family say the tension between the two women never fully thawed after the Sussex wedding. Their interactions, cordial in public, were often strained in private. Meghan's modernity clashed with Camilla's commitment to preservation, and now, with Doria cast out from Clarence house, that ideological divide was once again front and centre. The media's response was tepid, carefully curated, and quietly supportive of the palace. Editorials subtly echoed Camilla's stance, praising the importance of protocol and clarity of role within the firm. It was an indirect defense, but unmistakable. The machine had mobilized to protect the crown, not the mother of the Duchess. But Meghan's circle wasn't fooled. To them, Camilla's remark wasn't about structure, it was about supremacy. It was, in their words, calculated cruelty. A reminder that Doria's presence was never fully accepted, not as a family member, and certainly not as a representative of what the monarchy is willing to embrace. The comment left Meghan shaken, not by its harshness, but by its familiarity. The same cold detachment she had battled in silence for years had now turned toward her mother, and this time it was sharpened by royal authority. But while the royals closed ranks, one voice pierced through the silence, and it came from across the Atlantic. According to royal insiders, Prince Harry was apoplectic when he heard what happened to Doria. In a series of phone calls that rattled palace aides, he demanded accountability. But what he said to Charles could be the final fracture in an already broken relationship. The moment Meghan relayed the story, Harry's voice dropped, calm at first but tight, restrained. Then came the explosion. He didn't hesitate. He called Clarence house directly, bypassing aides and assistants, demanding to speak to someone who could answer for what had just happened. One insider described the call as volcanic. Harry's words were sharp, unfiltered. "How dare you treat her like this? How many times are we supposed to swallow your disrespect?" Staff on the other end were reportedly stunned, not because they hadn't heard Harry angry before, but because of the unmistakable resolve in his voice. This time, he wasn't asking for reconciliation. He was demanding retribution. What followed was a direct call to King Charles himself, a rare and volatile exchange between father and son. Charles, reportedly caught off guard, attempted to downplay the incident, insisting it was a logistical misstep and not a deliberate exclusion. But Harry wasn't having it. "You know what this was," he reportedly fired back. "You may not have said the words, but you signed the silence." The call ended with no apology, no clarity, and no peace. Just two men, standing on opposite sides of a widening chasm, with history collapsing between them. Back in California, the fallout was immediate. Meghan, who had tried to brace herself for yet another royal humiliation, couldn't contain her grief this time. According to a close friend, she broke down in tears, repeating just one phrase through clenched teeth: "They'll never accept us." For a couple who had already endured the brutality of palace politics and the cruelty of public condemnation, this wasn't just another slight, it was a final confirmation of everything they'd feared. Doria's rejection wasn't about protocol. It was about power, about boundaries, about keeping the institution sealed off from anything it deemed unfamiliar, inconvenient, or unworthy. Harry, still fuming, warned aides that if no formal apology was issued, they would go public. Legal action was reportedly discussed, not as a threat, but as a line in the sand. The palace, rattled by the speed and intensity of the backlash, scrambled into damage control. Crisis PR meetings were held. Senior advisors debated whether silence would protect the crown or further damage it. The fear wasn't just about public perception. It was about precedent. If Doria's treatment became a global scandal, it could reawaken everything the palace had fought to bury since Meghan and Harry's departure. The racism, the exclusion, the cover-ups. And yet, while the walls of Clarence house shook under the weight of Harry's fury, Doria said nothing. She didn't need to, because her silence, poised and deliberate, was louder than any royal decree. And while Harry made noise behind the scenes, Doria made her own statement without saying a single word. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't file a complaint. But hours after being turned away, Doria was seen in public arm-in-arm with Meghan and Lilibet, smiling with serene defiance. One photo, 1,000 unspoken truths. It wasn't orchestrated, but it couldn't have been more powerful. The image spread like wildfire. 3 generations of women resilient, dignified, united. No royal crest. No palace backdrop, just presence. And in that presence, a quiet rebellion. It was Doria's way of saying, "You may lock the gates, but you will never erase me from my daughter's life." That photograph didn't just capture a moment. It cracked open a conversation. Because while Clarence House tried to silence the scandal with carefully worded briefings, Doria let a single snapshot do the talking. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Doria, who had just been denied access to the symbolic heart of the monarchy, now stood in the open, not as a victim, but as a pillar. The message was clear. You can't keep me from my daughter or her future. The public responded instantly. Social media flooded with support. Hashtags like #WeStandWithDoria and #DignityInSilence trended within hours. Thousands reposted the image with words like grace, strength, and motherhood personified. But beneath the wave of praise was a deeper current, a collective reckoning with what the monarchy had come to represent. People saw in Doria not just a mother excluded, but a symbol of the boundaries the crown still refuses to break. Inside the palace, aides were reportedly caught off guard by the backlash. What they had hoped would fade quietly had now become an international image of resilience and, more dangerously, defiance. One royal source confessed, "We underestimated the emotional currency of that picture." Another admitted they were rattled by how quickly the narrative slipped from their control. But the truth is, they never controlled it. Meghan, deeply aware of what her mother had endured in silence, is said to have encouraged Doria that morning. "Walk proudly, don't let them shrink you." And she did, without a speech. Without a single line of defense, just her presence composed, steady, unbroken. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. On one side, the monarchy gilded, guarded, and crumbling under the weight of its own rules. On the other, a mother uninvited but undeniable. The photo captured a fracture, but it also captured a choice. A choice to be seen, a choice to take up space, a choice to say, without uttering a word, "I belong wherever my daughter stands." But behind the strength was a growing fracture, one that now threatens to reshape the monarchy's public image. 3 days after Doria's rejection, Buckingham Palace issued a short statement. But instead of quelling the storm, it only poured fuel on the fire. The wording, tone, and timing sent a clear message, one that divided the nation. The official line read, "We regret any misunderstanding during the visit to Clarence House." Just 13 words. 13 cold, clinical, carefully curated words that sidestepped the truth and silenced accountability. Nowhere in the statement was Doria's name mentioned. No acknowledgement of her identity, her position as Meghan's mother, or the emotional impact of being turned away. It wasn't an apology. It was a brush-off, a PR shield masquerading as compassion, and the public saw through it instantly. Inside the palace, there was panic. Senior aides convened in back-to-back meetings, trying to frame the narrative before it spiraled further out of control. The strategy was simple: downplay the event, deflect responsibility, and delay any deeper inquiry. But nothing about this incident could be buried. The photo of Doria, Meghan, and Lilibet had already gone viral. Harry's furious confrontation had leaked, and the silence from key royals only fueled suspicion. In private, palace officials were split. Some believed a direct apology would set a dangerous precedent, inviting scrutiny over other exclusions. Others warned that continued silence would paint the monarchy as cold, even cruel. Neither option felt safe, and so they did what institutions often do. When cornered, they issued a statement designed to say something without saying anything at all. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere turned frantic. Press officers scrambled to control the headlines. Sources were quietly deployed to clarify the context. And advisors close to Charles insisted it had all been a communication breakdown. A phrase repeated so often, it began to sound like a scripted chant. But the damage was already done. Meghan's team, tight-lipped but deeply aware of the public's mood, remained silent, waiting. And that silence scared the palace more than any press interview ever could. Because they knew that if Meghan chose to respond, if she stepped forward with her truth, the Crown's fragile narrative would shatter. The deeper fear, however, wasn't just about Meghan. It was about what her next move would inspire. Would this embolden Harry to speak out further? Would other royals begin to question the pattern of exclusion woven into the fabric of the institution? The palace had hoped for calm. What they got instead was backlash, global headlines, and a renewed public reckoning with how the monarchy treats those it cannot control. The 13-word statement that was meant to end the story had only rewritten its ending. Because people weren't looking for regret, they were looking for justice. And Doria's erasure had made that search more urgent than ever. And while the palace fumbled for a response, one family member chose not to stay silent any longer. She's known for loyalty to the crown, not sentiment. But even Princess Anne has her limits. In a closed-door confrontation, she reportedly told Charles that what happened to Doria was unacceptable. And for the first time, Anne took sides publicly. The Princess Royal, known for her stoicism and firm adherence to duty, surprised even those closest to her. Behind palace walls, she has long commanded respect not for theatrics, but for integrity. And when news of Doria's exclusion spread, Anne didn't remain silent. Royal insiders claim she marched into Charles's private quarters and delivered a blunt message. The monarchy's strength lies not in protocol, but in principle. She reminded him that they had withstood scandals and criticism before, but deliberate coldness toward the mother of a duchess was neither defensible nor forgettable. Anne, unlike most royals, has always viewed Doria Ragland with quiet admiration, not because of titles or appearances, but because Doria remained composed through a storm that could have broken anyone else. From the chaos of the royal wedding to the media frenzy that followed Meghan's exit, Doria never once faltered. She never sold her story, never gave a tell-all interview. She simply stood by her daughter, with grace. Anne noticed. And when Doria was turned away at Clarence house, Anne saw not just a snub, but a betrayal of what the monarchy claims to stand for. Reports indicate that Anne's confrontation with Charles was tense but unwavering. She didn't raise her voice, but her words hit harder than any headline could. "This is not who we are supposed to be." She allegedly told him a phrase that quickly leaked beyond the room and into royal corridors. It wasn't just a personal rebuke, it was a reckoning. And then, without fanfare, Anne made her move. Just weeks later, she attended a charity event focused on women's empowerment, and standing beside her for the first time in public was Doria. It was brief. No speeches, no staged photo ops, but it was enough. Enough to signal that the narrative wasn't unanimous inside the palace. Enough to remind the world that tradition and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Public opinion shifted sharply in Doria's favor. Commentators praised Anne's rare show of defiance. Social media erupted with praise for the Princess Royal, with many calling it the first real moment of moral clarity from within the firm. In a world where silence often shields the powerful, Anne's gesture spoke volumes. Not just about her character, but about the shifting tides inside the royal household. And for Doria, long seen as an outsider, that moment of solidarity meant more than any official statement ever could. It validated the quiet strength she'd carried all along and exposed the fault lines between those who cling to outdated systems and those who dare to speak when it matters most. But while individual royals spoke out, Doria herself had one final move, quiet, powerful, and impossible to ignore. In a handwritten letter delivered to Clarence House, Doria broke her silence, not with anger, but with clarity. Her words weren't designed to provoke, but they landed with devastating impact. Especially one line that now echoes through royal corridors. The letter arrived quietly, slipped into King Charles's private office without announcement or ceremony. No press release followed, no aides briefed the media, and yet, within hours, its existence was known. Because those who read it understood immediately this was not correspondence meant to soothe or flatter. It was a boundary, drawn with dignity. Doria wrote as a mother first, not as a subject. Her tone was measured, steady, unmistakably firm. She did not accuse. She did not plead. She stated truths that could no longer be ignored. According to sources familiar with its contents, the letter acknowledged the pain of exclusion, but refused to center it. Instead, Doria reframed the moment away from palace gates and toward family. The line that stopped readers cold read, "You may close your gates, but you won't close my family." It was simple, unadorned, and impossible to dismiss. In those words, Doria reclaimed power without raising her voice. She made it clear that access to buildings did not equal access to belonging, and that the monarchy's walls could not define love, loyalty, or legacy. For a family that has long controlled narratives through silence, the letter was a mirror held steady, forcing reflection. The palace refused to comment. No confirmation, no denial, just the familiar stillness that follows discomfort. Was it discussed behind closed doors? Did it change anything at all? What is known is that Meghan, after reading her mother's words, reportedly broke down, not from sadness, but from release. Years of swallowed anger and forced composure gave way to something closer to relief. Her mother had said what she herself could not, calmly, powerfully, on her own terms. Within royal circles, the letter is now viewed as a turning point, not because it demanded action, but because it stripped away illusion. It reminded the institution that dignity cannot be managed, and that silence does not always mean compliance. The monarchy has weathered scandals before, but this felt different. There were no leaks of rage, no explosive interviews, just a letter that lingered, unanswered, exposing a family still fractured by fear of change and haunted by its own choices. Because this wasn't just about one gate, one visit, or one mother, it was about a family that's still at war with itself. And now, the world is watching. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.